According to a recent Deloitte and Workplace Intelligence survey, 75% of executives considered quitting their jobs last year due to stress and lack of mental health support. Now, let that sink in. 3 out of 4 leaders at the top of their game were ready to walk away. Today, we're talking about why mental health isn't just a personal issue for CEOs, it's the foundation of effective leadership. I'm Julian Hayes II, founder of Executive Health, where we specialize in helping leaders optimize their health and performance with precision. Now, I've noticed a concerning pattern. Research has shown it talking through people, and a lot of CEOs meticulously manage their company's assets. A lot of entrepreneurs meticulously manage their business's assets, but they often neglect their most valuable resource, and that's their own mental well-being. And here's what nobody tells you about being a CEO. And I am definitely not at that kind of stage yet that a lot of the people I get to talk to and have been in the rooms with, and goes for entrepreneurs as well. Nobody tells you about these things. The corner office, being the founder, building. This can be the loneliest room in the building. And recent data has showed, I believe it was last year actually, 55% of CEOs faced mental health challenges in the past year alone. And for the entrepreneurs out there who may not be in corporate, you know this all too well. It's definitely a battle of your psyche as well. So you're definitely included in this as well. This is totally applicable to you. And this number here is particularly acute to millennial CEOs who are navigating these unprecedented pressures and changing of times. Literally, there's so many different things that are just really changing, and I can just feel it in my spirit and my energy. Not to get too woo-wooey, but I do feel like we are in some times that are dramatically changing the fabric of kind of how modern business is going, and even to a certain extent, society at large. But nevertheless, I digress a little bit. Some of the pressures that we talk about, as we mentioned, there's digital transformation. Of course, there's stakeholder activism. There's constantly being under the spotlight with scrutiny. There's a pressure to always perform. And you do all this on top of managing your personal life, also on top of managing your mental health. But here's the real cost. When a CEO's mental health suffers, their decision-making becomes cloudier, foggier. It's harder to see. It's like trying to navigate a ship through a storm with a foggy compass. Yeah, it's not going to be a good result. And some other research that I found was that cognitive functioning can decrease by up to 40% under sustained stress. So think about that. Almost half of your decision-making capacity is compromised. Now, as you heard me also say, I'm not saying you're going to have a stress-free environment. That's an oxymoron for this type of lifestyle that we've chosen. But it's how can you control that? How can you thrive a little better with all this stress and chaos going around you? That's the thing. And so this leads me to the next point here, where I want to challenge a common misconception, and that's executive therapy. A lot of times when we think about therapy, I think about the first time I went to therapy, I had so much like guilt and embarrassment about going to therapy, and even getting any type of coaching that came around my mindset, right? Business coaching, fitness coaching, performance coaching, that's one thing. But talking about how I feel, talking about my thoughts and things like that, that was a little tough for me. And I'm not sure if it's just a man thing, but I think it's especially tough for leaders because we're expected to be superheroes. People come to us with problems, so it's hard for us to kind of dispel and share our own problems. But I also want you to know that it's not damage control. It's actually a competitive advantage. And here's what some of the research says. Leaders who engage in therapy, they show measurable improvements in three critical areas. Number one, emotional intelligence. This is the ability to read rooms, manage relationships, navigate complex human dynamics. There's so many different types of personalities, different types of things that people are motivated by. When you have a higher EQ, when you have a higher EQ, this is going to be beneficial. Really, not even just in the boardroom, in the business room, but also in your day-to-day life, in your relationships. Number two here is strategic thinking. Now, therapy enhances your ability to see multiple perspectives. And having this skill set is beneficial from an innovation standpoint. It's beneficial from a problem-solving standpoint. And the third part here is resilience. This is the capacity to bounce back from setbacks and to lead through uncertainty. And you already know, I highly recommend hard physical training as a way to build resilience. But this mental aspect with the getting control of your psyche goes along with that in terms of really making you the most resilient that you can be. But despite these benefits that I named off, 81% of CEOs, according to another study that I've found, they still believe that these mental health struggles, are viewed as a weakness. So this perception isn't just wrong, it's actually costly. And this gets me into two of the biggest impacts of executive therapy. And the first one I want to talk about is one that it's not rare. It's something that's rarely discussed, but it's very important. I don't know why it's not discussed as much. And this is the impact of CEO mental health on relationships. And the Academy of Management Discoveries published interesting research that I found that showed how leadership stress creates this ripple effect. So when a CEO's mental health suffers, a lot of times we think it's affecting them, which it is, but it's also affecting their marriage, their girlfriend, fiance, whatever you want to have it, partner. It's affecting their family's relationships. It's affecting that individual in his relationships with his kids. And the ripple effect is not just in that present moment. It's the second, the third, and the fourth order consequences of not having that solidified marriage or not being as attentive to the kids and what that's going to lead to down the road. And ultimately, we tie this all up. It's their company's performance. Because in that study, it showed that the CEO who were going through these types of things, it actually bled into the company's performance. So I think an interesting way that we can think of therapy, you can think of coaching, whatever word you want to use in terms of regarding our mental psyche. It's like a way of relationship insurance. It gives you the tools to be present at home and effective at work. And an individual that I talked to a long time ago is a CEO, and he described it perfectly to me. He said, therapy helped me stop bringing my boardroom tension to my living room and stop bringing my home stress to my team meetings. And I found that was very interesting. You're not disregarding those things at all, but you're learning how to compartmentalize when you need to, like a high performance athlete. If you think about a lot of athletes who have a lot of off the court drama sometimes, but they go out there and perform like nothing's going on. And that's what we have to sometimes do as leaders. And one way to do that is to get this mental psyche under wraps. The second big part of executive therapy is the effects on the organization. Now, your mental health as a whole, this is going to set the cultural temperature of the entire organization. So when you prioritize your mental well-being, you're creating what psychologists call a permission field. I thought this was interesting, a very interesting word but I don't want to digress on that. But a permission field, and a permission field simply allows others to do the same. And if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. If you're the leader of the company, leader of the household, a lot of times they go as you go. And so companies with mentally healthy leaders show a 20% higher employee engagement and a 25% lower turnover rate. These aren't just soft metrics. These are concrete metrics that directly impact your bottom line. So I want to give you 4 concrete steps here to start prioritizing your mental health a little more. And these are some of the things that I do with myself personally, because mental health is something that I cannot take for granted. I've been described a little bit as a high variance person, and I am, but I have added constraints and I have added control measures to help me stay on the straight and narrow, as I call it. So number 1 is to schedule weekly check-ins with yourself. Sounds crazy, right? Block 30 minutes every Monday for a personal mental health audit, or make it on Sunday, 30 minutes before the family's up. Take 30 minutes and ask yourself, how's my stress level? What's driving it if it's high? What's driving it if it's low? What am I doing correct? How did the past week go? What support do I need? How's the relationships with my wife? How's the relationships with my kids, each of my kids? Where's improvement at on all those things? How's the relationship with myself? How do I talk about myself? It sounds a little woo-wooey and it sounds a little soft at times. But it's actually very beneficial. And it's funny when I think about these things and how they were explained to me the first time that I started to do some of these things, and just how weird it felt to give yourself some self-love, especially as a man. And that's the only perspective I can speak from, is to give yourself some self-love. Now, this doesn't make you complacent, but it just kind of acknowledges yourself and works on building your self-concept and identity. And the second part here of this 4 steps is to what I call find a therapeutic match. You can call it that. I like taglines. So executive therapy, it's not a one-size-fits-all ordeal. Research, interview potential therapists or coaches that you would like to hire, that you think is a good personality mesh for you in terms of your specific journey. Like, if you're a founder CEO and you're early on in your company, maybe you need someone who's had a little more experience with that. Whereas if you're someone who has a large company with a couple thousand employees, it's going to be a little different than someone who has maybe 20 employees. And there's different therapists for all those types of things. And I think those are the little intangibles that we have to consider strongly when we're doing something like this, because it's a very intimate experience to really kind of start shedding some of these layers. So lastly, look for someone who also understands the personal dynamics in the business context. And number 3 is create psychological safety. Start one meeting each week. And when you do this, share a personal challenge that you're working through. And this simple act can transform your company's mental health culture and can unlock so many doors, can build so much loyalty, which can ultimately improve your talent recruiting and retention, because it's much cheaper and much more effective and better to keep someone than to have to go find someone and then train them. That's expensive, and you're still not sure if it's a guarantee to work. So this is a great way for all those things right there that a lot of corporate and companies are measuring these days. And number 4 is, let's call this implementing movement medicine. And this is at the baseline, the foundation. 30 minutes of daily exercise can be as effective as medication for managing anxiety and depression. I'm not a doctor. I went to school for a year. That was enough of that. I don't want that. So don't take this as medical advice. That's my legal jargon. Go speak with a licensed professional, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm just going to tell you, move in your body and motion daily, hopefully for more than 30 minutes. but that's the baseline. That's going to do wonders for your mental health and your anxiety. So a lot of times action alleviates anxiety. So find and schedule your non-negotiable movement time and protect it like you would a board meeting. We got to remember that we're in this for the long haul, and we don't have to lose ourselves in order to have the quote unquote success in our companies. You don't have to do that. I believe you can have it all with the right structure, though. So taking care of your mental health, it's not self-indulgent. It's a self-investment. The strongest leaders aren't the ones who never struggle. They're the ones who actively work on their mental well-being. Because after all, your mental strength is your competitive advantage.